Hi, I'm Regulus. It's a good time to be an anime fan right now. There's a lot out there. There's a ton of things getting well recognized that are getting games made on based on them. Not all those games are going to be good. Uh, there's plenty of great gacha games out there. There's plenty of great other mobile games out there. There's plenty of console stuff out there. But there's also like stuff that is overusing the IP to sell itself and not necessarily good in its own right, or not necessarily a good representation of the franchise it's pulling from. And having had to glean off like previews and stuff for a given game before, is this going to be good? Like not knowing, like looking at all these anime games that are coming out in the future, are they going to be good? I don't know. I can't know. And so I got to thinking, what if like I showed other people some of these games that I've found to be very worth my time, that like I've had a great experience with, that I think other people would like appreciate to hear about. And so I started thinking about this when the first Fairy Tail game came out in 2020, and started thinking about it again when the second game came out in 2024. So these are 6 anime games that I find to be worth your time, that are good games, often developed by industry veterans that do the franchise justice that they're pulling from, and aren't some cash in on the franchise's popularity, like a lot of things can be sometimes. So when I say anime game, I'm referring strictly to a licensed game, like nothing that was a gacha game first that then made an anime on it. Like Princess Connect is wonderful, but like that was a game first, then an anime. So that would be against the point. Also, no crossovers. Dengeki Bunko Fighting Climax is great. It's a good fighting game, but like that's a crossover. Like obviously there's going to be great crossovers out there. That like I'm looking for things that are a single franchise. So I've not played Super Robot Wars, but I hear great things about it. So that's obviously not be included. The other thing is it has to be a franchise that I personally like. So I'm sorry to Dragon Ball. Like I've heard amazing things about Dragon Ball Fighters. Its arc system works. I used to play a ton of BlazBlue. Like I wasn't very good at Grand Blue Fantasy Versus or Rising, but like I still enjoyed it. And like that was the kind of thing where like, okay, like if I liked Dragon Ball, I would love this, but I've never been into Dragon Ball, so I can't play that one really and get the enjoyment that Dragon Ball fans will. So these are 6 anime games that I enjoy, that are franchises that are based on anime franchises that I enjoy. Above all, these anime games are worth your time. Let's get started. Gust has made a name for themselves lately with the Atelier series. I'm not too big of a fan of the Atelier series, but I did like their first outing in the Fairy Tail franchise in 2020, adapting the Grand Magic Games and Tartarus arcs of Fairy Tail. So when they announced another game adapting the final arc of the main Fairy Tail manga and anime, pictured before you, I was fully on board with it. And when they came out with it, I was very impressed because the game was much better than the first one and kind of blew me away last year. So as far as this battle system goes, you've got your diamonds of stamina that you have to manage that'll go up as you use given attacks more. And then you've got your how much break you inflict on an enemy and how much damage you inflict on said enemy. So that enemy that just got broken is going to take a link attack from Gajil and Juvia here and get quickly ended. And that other guy is pretty close to it too, so he's going to die when Erza hits him in the face with the Sea Emperor's sword. Then we flash to this other fight with this bird here. We're going to break him real quick. And then we're going to hit him with the link attack, and then I don't recall off the top of my head what I used here, but it did a ton of damage. Alright, Nakagami Starlight. Sweet. Sweet armor. Boom! Boom! Okay, Erza's awesome. I love her. She was my main throughout the game. So now I'm going to a boss fight here to show a little more of the battle. Obviously, each character has their own element. He's weak to both water and ice, so we have Gray and Juvia here to hit his weaknesses more and break him faster. For some reason, I guess we use Natsu a lot too because he's the main character and all. But this adapts basically the full story of the final arc from the Spriggan 12 fights with them up until the final battles with Zeref and Acnologia. And it's a very good JRPG from people, Gust, who know what they're doing with them, who have made all those Atelier games that have been so successful, putting a very competent system together where you've got to break an enemy and then inflict the amount of damage while it's broken as much as you can and get through its HP bar. Obviously, they know what they're doing from all their time with Atelier, Knights of Azure, and some of the other ones Gus has made. Off the top of my head, Blue Reflection, I guess, is them, or is that also some other part of Tecmo Koei? I forget. Anyway, it's a really competent adaptation of the final arc of Fairy Tail. It made me really fun. I had a great time running through this game at the same time as when I was watching the Fairy Tail 100-Year Quest project, and I assume that's going to get another game from Gust soon enough. But Fairy Tail 2 is a really good anime game. It really does the franchise justice. It adapts the final arc pretty well, doesn't cut anything important. There were times in the first game where I was like, okay, this could have used more budget here to have models of the characters that don't do too much, just to have them be there, because it's a pretty iconic fight, even if you only saw them once. You don't have that as much in the second game. Like, everything is... I guess they reuse a lot of their assets from the first game, which, yeah, makes sense. And because of that, they were able to do so much more with it. They made such a great game with this. Anyway. I guess I'll let this fight finish. Overall, the Spriggan 12 are kind of forgettable. I love Fairy Tail, but like when Hiro Mashima does a mini-boss squad that's only going to be around for an arc, he doesn't make them take too long like Tide Kubo does. Like, those arcs can drag on forever. But he will make them pretty forgettable. Like, for better or for worse, like, you're not going to have the low lows of Bleach, watching some Espada that you don't care about taking forever to die. But you aren't going to have the high highs either of, like, Grimmjow or Ulquiorra with the mini-boss squads. They're pretty much going to be forgettable one-offs for the most part, with exceptions, obviously, like Ultir and whatnot. And the Spriggan 12 are like, okay, 12 is too many, 10 is too many. Like, as series go on, you find out that having that many mini-bosses is just too many. Looking at you, Bleach, with your Vandenreich arc having 26 mini-bosses. Oh man, that guy's got a large break gauge. Okay, we're breaking it. I was going to let this finish just to... Get him, Gray! Juvia's got this. Outside of like managing your stamina to do your given attacks and hit the break gauge to be able to hit the HP gauge, you've got these special attacks like this one here that you have a separate gauge for the fairy rank that does its own thing, and you can use those as the fairy rank fills up from doing attacks. There's a couple that take like a maxed out fairy gauge that can do some really serious stuff. But for the most part, you're going to be relying on these couple of attacks to break enemies, give you more wiggle room to do damage with. Natsu, you're not doing anything with that fire. What are you doing, buddy? Juvia will cure her beloved Gray. Come on, do an attack here. Water Nebula! Okay. Let's get some attacks in, and Water Jigsaw. Is that going to be enough to break him? Maybe not. Do I actually finish him in this video? I hope so. If I don't, I'm going to do another take, I'm pretty sure. We got him, we got him. Okay, so we got the break off. I think this attack is going to finish him. With the power of Gray and Juvia's love. And that's it for him. Fairy Tail is a great adaptation of the final arc of the manga. It's a great JRPG made by veterans that know what they're doing, and it's an anime game worth your time. Would recommend. Obviously, I don't need to tell you that the Naruto franchise is extremely popular and was even more popular at one point during its heyday. One of the things that contributed to getting me into the franchise was the game from CyberConnect 2, Naruto Shippuden Ultimate Ninja Storm 2. And apparently, the ones after that kept its legacy going too. I haven't played the fourth one yet, but I played the third one after I recorded footage for this. And I'm going to play the fourth one at some point, definitely. So, where this franchise excels as a brawler is really capturing, I guess, the battles aspect of Naruto. Like, you've got like all these cool attack animations, like Naruto using his shadow clones and Rasengans to fight Kakashi here. And you've also got your supports, which is good for like the team structure that you had with all the different. You've got times where you'll have Naruto and Sakura together. You'll have times where Shikamaru has Ino and Choji for supports, for example. And that franchise, it works well for this franchise because of how important teamwork is. And the other thing is these quick time events that are on screen right now. You've got this cool cinematic approach to these battles that's really showing off like some pretty cool graphics for their time, I guess. The other thing is, like, they're pretty cinematic. So you've got, like, I usually don't like quick time events as a thing, which is why this struck me as so weird, because, like, I guess I'm more ready for them in this battle system, whereas when they come at you all of a sudden, I am just not expecting it, and I really don't like having to start a press X to not die, oh no, kind of thing. It's never fun dealing with that. But here, like, you do a sequence of pretty cinematic fighting. Obviously, Sakura's punch hit pretty hard there, and now Kakashi is at much lower health, and the battlefield has completely changed as a result of Sakura's very hard punch. And now Kakashi is going to try a little harder to get us with this electric attack he's about to use, which is unique to the boss fights, I guess, in this, where like you'll have a totally different battle arena and like stuff dealing with that. And here we're going to beat Kakashi up a little more, and then as that gets a little closer, as that puts a bigger dent in his health bar. Ow, that hurt. Then the second series of quick time events in this boss fight is going to show up, and we're going to fight Kakashi's final series of quick time events and his final set of stuff he wants to throw at us. So, what makes this series, this particular franchise of games good, with some caveats, is like that you can use all the jutsu of your friends from Naruto. You can really feel like they're doing their usual thing, like Shikamaru's whole shadow possession jutsu will actually paralyze someone in their tracks while you're fighting them, and that's really cool. So now we're seeing Kakashi's second set of quick time events in this fight, and Naruto is going to Sakura is going to proceed to throw Naruto at him, which is fun. And then with all these shadow clones, enough shadow clones to populate an Ultimate Ninja Storm roster. Boom! Taking a dig at Ultimate Ninja Storm 4's 8 Narutos in the game there. But anyway, we've got this Kakashi fight here, and Naruto and Sakura are about to steal the bells. And we got all the stars from these quick time events. So we're going to see something special at the end here, which is to say that any second now. Ding, there go the bells. So this bells drill is one of the classic things in all the generations of Naruto, where you fight your mentor and take the bells from him to prove your strength. And this is reminiscent specifically because when they first started out as a team, they were doing it with Sasuke on their team, and they all miss him and they all want him to come back. And he's moved on to his own life at this point, so they can't really bring him back, unfortunately. And that's always going to hurt for them. But eventually Naruto and Sasuke will have their little fight, but that's not going to be part of this video. Next up, we've got Sasuke fighting Itachi to show off this battle system too, because I really wanted to show this fight. I had very positive memories of it. So one thing with this is Sasuke, you in this part of Naruto, because it's following the plot from the beginning of Shippuden up until the Pain Invasion, you've got a decent amount of plot to cover with fighting the Akatsuki. So you've got a lot there. But this fight with Itachi is kind of separate from the main fight with Akatsuki. So you've got Sasuke doing his own thing, fighting Itachi. And it's a pretty good fight. Like, before Itachi uses the whole Amaterasu, like, you've got, like, just two characters that are using all of their jutsu against each other, going all out, really. And obviously we haven't seen quite as many quick time events this time around as we saw in the first Kakashi fight, because there aren't quite as many in Sasuke's fights, I feel like. But this fight in particular obviously is very cinematic because it's very important to the franchise. But obviously defeating Itachi has been Sasuke's life's purpose, and he's slightly misinformed about that, but at the same time it's been his life's thing, and now Itachi is doing his thing, and we're starting quick time events. So here we go. Breathing fire at each other. So yeah, this series of games specifically helped me get into the Naruto franchise. I was kind of late to the Naruto party. The Zabuza arc at the beginning of Naruto kind of bored me, and then I tried this game out randomly because I saw the quick time events and the battles looked cool. And my friend was like, okay, if you're really trying to get into this time and you don't want to run into what you did last time, just start at the Chunin exams and go back and watch Zabuza later. And I'm like, thank you so much, buddy. Like, you have no idea how much this helped me, because after that I became a Naruto addict and watched every week until the end of Shippuden, and like, that was crazy to do because Shippuden has so much filler in it. And this was like, honestly, after Pain, there was so much filler in Shippuden. Oh my god! Like, I guess they didn't want to give up their time slot. Fair enough. Like, and they didn't want to do like one 85-week stretch of filler like they did in part 1 of Naruto, because then people lose interest and stop watching. And that's like, okay, I get why they did Shippuden like they did, where they just drag on forever and ever. But like, oh my god, sometimes it was painful to keep going. Like, I wouldn't have kept going if I hadn't kept going, if that makes sense. It was less energy to keep going every week than it would be to catch up if I fell behind. And now Itachi's kind of going all out. He really wants Sasuke to win this fight and has to make sure he's ready for what's next with, I guess they're calling that character Madara Uchiha at this point in the story. They haven't established anything else yet, so let's go with that. Sasuke is doing a thing where he dodges and gets around Itachi, gets a couple attacks in. That thing, obviously this boss is very threatening. Like, you don't want to get hit by the sword, you don't want to get hit by all the rubble that gets launched, you just got to get the attacks in on Itachi while you can. I'm doing pretty well though, aren't I? I don't actually, so after this game, they released something called Ultimate Ninja Storm Generations, which I actually wouldn't recommend as much. It was kind of lame compared to this, and that was like why I stopped playing for a while. But then they released an Ultimate Ninja Storm 3, which is everything from after Pain to the Obito reveal, and I was like, oh my god, this is exactly what I wanted the next game in this series to be, and it just kept going, and I wish I'd paid attention the whole time. And apparently there's 4 after that too that I still have to play. So there you go. Like, this series is pretty damn good. It's pretty damn faithful to the Naruto franchise. Like, obviously they cut out some less important fights, but they get all the major ones in there, and like, they do some pretty amazing stuff. And like, you can get all of them on one collection a lot of the time, and it's pretty cool. Alright, Sasuke, you almost got this. Finish this up, finish it up, finish it up. It's your life's work. Alright, watch out for the ow. Okay, Sasuke. Come on. Be less of a failure protagonist, please. I guess he's not really a protagonist anymore at this point, but he was never really the main villain, like, as much as, like, sometimes he kind of tried to be. Like, you had Obito and Madara and Kaguya and, don't let me think about Kaguya, that was kind of a mess. But you've got this whole thing, like, and this is one of the best fights in the franchise, and this game definitely does it justice. And, oh, watch out for the sword. Oh, God, ow. This part of the fight is not as good, honestly. Like, it's kind of hard to get enough damage in with how crazy this sword gets. But overall, it is a faithful, like, capture of this particular fight in this series, and, like, I really think this fight is one of the iconic ones to the series. It gives the whole legacy of the Uchiha clan is Itachi will take the truth to his grave, in theory. So Sasuke is... Okay, we're on the next series of quick time events. Cool. So as you can see, Sasuke is kind of freaking out here, like he has no idea Itachi was this strong, even though he came here planning to finish him off. Like, he has no idea just how strong Itachi is. But because Itachi killed the rest of the Uchiha clan, he's devoted his life to that vengeance, that revenge, and given probably more than he should have to Orochimaru, who is now rearing himself to try to take Sasuke's body again, even though Sasuke thought he was dead. But, you know, Orochimaru is kind of hard to kill because he leaves his curse mark in people, and he's never really dead, even when he's dead. And even then, someone has the great idea to revive him with Edo Tensei. But at that point, like, you've got that whole great scene, like, late in the series, with Naruto summoning the toad, Sakura summoning the slug, Sasuke summoning the snake, and Jiraiya's not around to cheer Naruto on anymore. But one thing Naruto always does is, like, leave things to the next generation. It's like a core theme of the franchise, and even someone as screwed up as Orochimaru is seeing Sasuke doing that snake in, like, his image, basically, and he's like, that's my boy. But so you've got... There's a lot of people that were relevant in Sasuke's upbringing. Itachi is one of them. Obito is one of them. Orochimaru is one of them. And, of course, Kakashi from his days before leaving the Leaf Village. Obviously, Itachi is not to be trifled with. So Orochimaru is gone. And Sasuke can fight on his own now without that whole curse mark thing. So I'm going to let this fight finish, but that's basically Naruto Shippuden Ultimate Ninja Storm 2. It's a good anime brawler. It is worth your time. It's a good representation of the Naruto franchise. Jeez, this fight goes on that much longer. Okay. Okay. So obviously the Itachi's killing of the Uchiha clan is a big deal in the Naruto plotline, and this is kind of the first time where Sasuke gets any piece of the truth. Even though Itachi intended to take it to the grave with him, and Sasuke is scared that Itachi is going to kill him right now, but instead Itachi is just, going to die. And that's where this fight ends, with Itachi's end. Sasuke is a little traumatized. And once again, we're seeing the secret factor here, seeing their past together. And that's something that really gets you invested in whether you get the stars from the QuickTime events, I guess. So that's this game for you. Naruto Shippuden Ultimate Ninja Storm 2. Worth your time. Almost done. A lot of shonen anime out there will map pretty well to a fighting game. You've got a lot of one-on-one battles, and Bleach is honestly no exception to that, but it also maps well to something that in its time, though less so now, was less frequent in games. It made a Muso game. That is to say, Bleach, Soul Resurrección. Now, Bleach, Soul Resurrección, you've got a lot of lesser enemies that you fight over the course of things. You've got a lot of abilities you can use over the course that you budget out, like your usage of as you do stuff. You break a bunch of nondescript buildings in Hueco Mundo because Tide Kubo was lazy about drawing backgrounds. You destroy a lot. You beat a lot of lesser hollows to get around, and occasionally you actually use Ichigo's hollow form to do stuff, which is kind of overkill on these little enemies here. But then you get to fights like Grimmjow, where you actually need your good stuff. And in this case, it's still a one-on-one. It's not really a fighting game. It's still the Muso's controls. But in this case, we've got a full-on boss ahead of us. So Ichigo's going to have to fight pretty hard here, isn't he? Grimmjow's a pretty fierce opponent. Yeah. But Ichigo's no slouch himself, so... So where this game excels, I feel like it feels faithful to material. The Japanese voice cast all does really well at their characters. It's primarily an adaptation of the Hueco Mundo and Aizen arc, I guess. You're primarily fighting the Espada and Aizen over the course of the game. Hopefully everyone watching this by now knows that Aizen is a bad guy and I didn't just spoil someone on Soul Society. Oops, if I did, I'm very sorry. But basically you've got something where it was one of the last Bleach games made while the anime was still running, because Aizen they had just finished, I think when this game came out, the whole thing with Aizen, his whole arc had just ended. I think they were doing the Fullbringers arc at the time, maybe it had just ended. But obviously this was 2011, it was way before they started the current anime adapting the final arc. But the controls are good. As far as franchises that have you effortlessly curb stomping random enemies and then getting your butt kicked by bosses as you fight them, Bleach is a pretty good franchise for that. And this game is no slouch in its own regards. Grimmjow is strong enough, but Ulquiorra is obviously an even bigger deal. Right? And at the end of each level, you'll get some kind of reward, like as is wont to do in a Muso. Like you'd see that kind of thing a lot. So throughout the game, we're doing a lot of you're doing a lot of this. You're doing a lot of fighting, this like doing repeated combos, fighting the same enemies. But it's a good. It fits the series well. Like the cast all does a great job with delivery of their characters. They don't let you play as just anyone. Like there's a lot of characters that are less significant in what happens, frankly, in Hueco Mundo and the fight with Aizen. And like, for example, Yasutora Chad Sato is not playable at all. Like that's kind of understandable for how little he does. I forget. I don't think Renji is playable. Rukia might be. Ishida is. Yeah, Rukia is playable. Ishida is playable. I had to reinstall this game and like start from scratch with my save file, so I don't have too much footage of later stuff. But over the course of the game, Ichigo will get stronger. There's a lot of stuff. It's got a good stat building system, reminiscent of Final Fantasy X's Sphere Grid, as you develop your character. And you get little spirits as you go that help with that. As you play a character, you'll get more stuff for that character. Really, and then like once you've beaten the story and finally kicked Aizen to the curb, you can finally do like the challenge mode where like there's like I remember I did like everything except one level in that because like you had to fight Aizen and Baragon and Stark at the same time, which is absolutely insane. And I was using the version of Ichigo that uses his final Getsuga Tencho. Like if you use that, like it does a ton of damage, but you're left with like 1 HP, and being left with like 1 HP while Baragon's Aura is doing a thing that like makes you constantly take damage is not a great situation to be in. So I didn't finish there, and I kind of gave up. And then my PS3 crashed in 2016, so that's fun. Oh, I think are we at Ulquiorra now, or we're close to it? Anyway. Okay, cool. So as you've seen here, there's a lot of like endlessly fighting trash mobs as is typical of a Muso. Since then, like the idea of an anime Muso has become more popular. Like after Hyrule Warriors, Tecmo Koei went on to do all kinds of licensed properties like Hyrule Warriors, Fire Emblem Warriors, One Piece Pirate Warriors, and one we're going to talk about after this, Arslan the Heroic Warriors of Legend. But we'll get to that. Right now we're talking Bleach. So here's a pretty random Arrancar that gave us a little bit of trouble. And we proceed, I think. Once everything's out of the way. We get some items. Maybe it's like... Okay, skip to Ulquiorra. So Ulquiorra is obviously like a big deal. Like that was a huge fight for Ichigo that he lost the first time around. And I do not have the thing after this where something happens after this fight that's, you know, a spoiler 10 years later, 15 years later. God, I'm old. So Ichigo is fighting Ulquiorra here. Let's move this along. Resurrección segunda etapa. Second type. Mi español no es bueno. But Ichigo's giving it his all like he always does. And in a second he's going to have to run away really fast because Ulquiorra hits like a truck and you do not want to take one of his arrows to the face. Anyway, yeah, so you get the idea here. You've got a lot going on here. Like, you've got your standard special bar that is like how much stuff you can do. You've got your dash attacks. You've got your special, like, in-place melee attack where Ichigo does the downward thrust. You've got your gauge, which is how long Ichigo can keep up his hollow form, which is consistent with, like, what he was going through at the anime at the time, with, like, how much he struggled with it, how much... Like, it was difficult for him to be at full power for a given period of time, given he couldn't really control the hollow, which, ironically, is relevant to this fight. But Just about wrapping up here. We're about to take something to the face, I think. Oh yeah, that's gonna hit me in the face right now. Ulquiorra is obviously not to be trifled with. Ichigo, you should learn and, like, get a better hollow form or something when you're fighting someone this strong. But that's Bleach Soul Resurrección for you. A pretty solid adaptation, like the things that they cut out to keep things reasonable and not have to make too many characters into the battle engine make sense. Like, yes, it would be nice to play more characters, and yes, like, I'm looking forward to the Bleach game that's coming out in the future that's going to have, like, more of the story than just this one arc. But at the same time, as an adaptation of the Hueco Mundo arc, this is a pretty good game. Pretty solid experience for me when I played it back in 2011. And that's Bleach Soul Resurrección for you. A good game and an anime game worth your time. I'll let this cutscene play out. The Heroic Legend of Arslan, a manga with art from Hiromu Arakawa, famous for Full Metal Alchemist, got an anime adaptation, and then this Musou game, Arslan, the Heroic Warriors of Legend. In this Musou game, you pretty much know what you're getting into. It's a Musou game, obviously. You play as one guy, one hero in a large army, destroying hundreds of faceless enemy soldiers, occasional boss fights, and mostly you're going to be doing the slashes. One thing that differentiates it is that you will be able to switch weapons on the fly. You will be able to switch between weapons. There's a thing where Narcissus uses a paintbrush. I don't have Narcissus in this video, unfortunately. But basically, as Arslan goes to reclaim the throne from after Karlan's betrayal, you'll see him and his retainers. So this is cutting away to Karlan's betrayal here. And we're just about to switch to controlling Daryun for this battle. Basically, you can switch between a variety of weapons, which is more than you can do in a lot of Musou games where you're stuck to one weapon. And you can use all the different retainers of Arslan, which is pretty cool. I stuck to Daryun a lot myself because he's pretty overpowered, but that's the way it goes. But you've got your horses, you've got your different weapons you can switch between. It's one thing I will say about the horses is that being able to call your horse to you is like, I wish more games made horses control this smoothly. Looking at you, Breath of the Wild. And now we're going to fight Karlan. Daryun is obviously a house as far as being able to do a ton of damage really fast. He's very strong. He's got a pretty wide reach with his spear. And obviously I did this at a much higher level of the characters. There's some RPG elements to it and all. There's like upgrading your weapon and stuff. It's fairly minor, honestly. Like, you don't need to pay all that much attention to it. If you know what you're doing in action battles, it's pretty simple. I think if you play on like the harder difficulties, it can be a bigger deal. Like, I didn't get that far into it. Like, I usually don't with Musou games. Like, you can go so deep. I remember doing that with Fire Emblem Warriors. Like, you can go so deep into these games if you really want to. But as far as like being a very strong adaptation of the Heroic Legend of Arslan, I feel like this format, I guess, a Musou game for the story they wanted to tell, where you've got your hero who has lost his birthright throne, and like all these good retainers who are fighting to restore him to the power to fight with him, even more so than they would the existing king, because who knows what they don't know at this point in the time that the king's still alive. So they see Arslan both as like someone better than the previous king in this time of turmoil, and someone they can really trust, someone who's worth it. I'm reminded a little bit of Suikoden 5, which was heavily influenced by the original folktale that this is loosely based on about that the heroic legend of Arslan itself is loosely based on. So one thing that distinguishes, so you've seen the basic combat, you've seen a little bit of like different characters. One thing I wanted to show is the cavalry in this. Even though you're fighting like as one unit at any given time, you can do these things called cavalry. I forget what they were called. Sorry, it's some kind of cavalry charge. You can see this chain building up of like how many enemies we're taking out or fighting as we do this. But basically it gives like a lot more of that large scale battle thing that like is lacking in a lot of Muso games because you're one guy. Anyway, the Heroic Legend of Arslan is a good representation of the franchise. It's an anime game worth your time. I consider myself an on-again, off-again fan of the Sword Art Online franchise. The first arc was pretty nice. The second arc is often regarded as a misfire. Alicization is very polarizing. But the arc that I generally liked from start to finish, and probably even more than the first arc in its overall execution because it feels like it has less filler, was the Gun Gale arc. When I say filler about the first arc, I mostly mean stuff that doesn't really help the main plotline along, talking about that whole Ancrad thing. So, when they announced Sword Art Online Fatal Bullet, a game based on that story arc, but like most of the Sword Art Online games with its own stuff going on of its own plot separate from the main plot of the books / anime, it's like it intrigued me a lot because I'd played Hollow Realization before it and been kind of iffy on it, and then Fatal Bullet is kind of the sweet spot for me with Sword Art Online games because it got the exact arc I really liked, and with gameplay that was better for me. I'm not great at shooters. As you can see, I'm using aim assist here. I'm sure shooter elitists are gonna laugh at me for how bad I am at this, but like when you're not great at shooters and like you're playing something that's kind of a third-person shooter, it helps to have that kind of thing in place. But you will see me over the course of this video doing some like sniper shooting, just not right off the bat because I hadn't played this in quite a while. Oh, there I go. Got one. Boom, headshot. Oh, wait, I didn't actually get that one. So Sword Art Online Fatal Bullet, it has a Kirito mode that follows the main plot of Gun Gale Online's story, and it also has its own plot that is like pretty good in its own regard, and you have most of the Sword Art Online characters involved, including ones from main series Sword Art, ones from Gun Gale, ones from actually later arcs, I think. I think Alice was eventually added to this, and then you've got the Sword Art Online alternative, which I'm not as big on, but like it's nice that you put Gun Gale Online, Sword Art Online alternative characters in a show that's themed on Gun Gale, especially since that anime is also themed on it. So the game is a solid enough third-person shooter RPG. You've got your share of like weapons, loot to find. I stuck with a sniper rifle and basically Shinon's character design for most of the game. She's my favorite, Sumi. And you can see it's got its share of tough enemies. I'm pretty overleveled for like the main enemies here. I guess I did the true ending. I didn't do any of the DLC stuff, so I'm sure there's like stronger enemies somewhere, but I got pretty overleveled for the main game over the course of things. And ground out a lot of stuff. Here I am futilely trying to aim at this robot's very highlighted weak point on his back and failing at it miserably because I'm very bad at shooters. But you also have 3 AI companions with you, and every time they help you or you help them or like you tell them, hey, good job, like your relationship with them gets a little better, and there's like a whole thing with talking to your party members and getting stuff from them, which is kind of cool. Like, you can date them if you really want to. And your self-insert character can be whoever you want, and that's pretty cool. You can pick any weapon you want, including Kirito's lightsabers, if you really want to in this game. There I go, I actually landed a couple shots. Alright. I stuck with sniper rifles. I'm not great at shooters, and with the aim assist, Like, I can at least hit things with a gun that mostly does damage, and I guess you could probably argue that it also suffers a bit in that, like, it doesn't have, like, a high firing rate, or, like, I'm not particularly good at sniping. But hey, we did beat that guy, so I do not want to think what this game would have been like without aim assist. Like, I'm obviously not great at shooters, but, like, this does pretty well. As far as Sword Art Online, like, it's a fun series to be involved in. The games are fun. Like, they've got their own thing going on. Got him. Okay, I think he's dead. Cool. As far as, like, other stuff, there's, like, a little grappling hook you've got throughout the game. There's, like, different other gadgets you get throughout stuff. And, like, you can res your allies if they happen to die in battle. And as far as levels, there's, like, the open fields that go between the different dungeons. And there's also the actual dungeons, which we're, I think, going to one of, maybe? Yes. No. Yes. Dungeon design is pretty solid. I remember when I was first starting streaming, I did a few dungeons in this game sometimes. I don't know that it went particularly well as far as streaming when I was kind of looking for something, but like the dungeon design is solid enough. There's treasure, good loot to find. Obviously, it's not going to be at the level of like Borderlands or something like that, or Destiny or something with loot, but like you can get. It's a fun game. It looks good. It plays good. Like, you don't have to be great at shooters. The others are not shooters. Most of the Sword Art Online games are using swords, unsurprisingly. The one after this, I couldn't get into for some reason. Oh. That was not the right dungeon. Anyway. Sword Art Online Fatal Bullet is a good adaptation of the Gun Gale arc of Sword Art Online. It's a good third-person shooter. If it's a good game within the Sword Art Online universe, and it's a good anime game worth your time. When you think of Love Live School Idol Project or its second generation Love Live Sunshine, you probably think I'm going to start talking about a rhythm game and not a Metroidvania. However, YOHANE the Parhelion, Blazing the Deep Blue, is just that, a Metroidvania. The first character, as you go through the game, you recruit various friends, you get their abilities to help you traverse the areas more, and learn new and fight interesting bosses using those abilities, and so on and so forth until you've explored everything. The first ability you just saw there was Chica's stun gun, which can be used to push boxes. It can also be used to stun particular enemies, like this boss here. Like, you can see him getting stunned there, and you've got a window to attack him, and like that's basically your strategy for beating this boss is completely contingent on having this stun gun there to work with. And because you have that, you can stun him, you can do a ton of damage, you can have a good window to attack him, whereas if you didn't have that, you wouldn't be able to do that. And you fight a couple enemies like this throughout the game, but mostly this one boss is like your huge check on having the stun gun and being able to use it effectively to stop him from doing his attacks, and so on. Next up, you get Kanon, who gets these abilities that will enable you to use her heavy frog robot to break concrete barriers and traverse the areas that they block you from getting to. That's the big thing. Sometimes you've got like a fork in the road that you can't go all the ways without her. Sometimes it's some area you can't pass at all without her. And sometimes you've got enemies that if you approach them to counterattack will run away from you. So you need an ability that you can use from a distance, and Kanon's fits the bill pretty well, though I'm certainly not showing it. Next up is Daya. She does a thing with an electrical attack, bzz, you're wrong, to turn on the generator in a given area, like this one next to us. In this particular case, it turns on the elevator, which lets us get around this area a lot more efficiently. Like, I showed you jumping around the room before to demonstrate just how much better it is to have that. Similarly, you can see things if you light up a room with her ability hitting a generator. And that lets you see a lot more. You won't fall as much. You won't be surprised by enemies as much. And here's another elevators area in a later area. Next up is Hanamaru. She does a thing where she rolls and gets rid of spikes. You need that throughout the game. Outside of some areas that are very difficult to traverse without the ability, there are also some bosses that will cover the floor in spikes as part of their attack patterns. And like that's something you have to deal with if you want to still have a floor to stand on and still be able to not be taking damage just by standing. You can be mean and roll Hanamaru into a wall if you want to. It's semi based on a scene where Hanamaru is wearing a heavy winter coat and rolls over YOHANE and Ruby. But she also gets an attack based on a scene where she destroys a laptop that makes a laptop explode and does a ton of damage to an enemy. It's the future, Zora! Mira and Zora! Next up is Riko. She does your staple Metroidvania kind of thing. Gets particular barriers out of your way. In her case, she does a fire spell that gets rid of ice barriers. Pretty straightforward. In this case, we're getting the one out of the way that blocks the way to get her book. She gets a second attack with her spell book that lets her do a much stronger fire attack that also ignores walls, which I'm going to show the effects of momentarily. Every character has got a second ability you can unlock by bringing them their special hidden item that they lost somewhere in the dungeon, basically. And that's the general premise. Outside of finding your friends, you find their lost items. So Riko's second ability is a really strong attack by itself. You can see it wipe that guy's face. It's also really good for getting things like this, where you don't have a direct shot on that and it has to go through a wall. So then you need Riko's ability to break the thing that way. And then I use it wastefully. But then I launch off Yo's cannon to get through this crevice, which is going to segue into our next thing. So Yo gets a cannon. Fans of the YOHANE, the PARHELION anime, are familiar with using the cannon to launch YOHANE around. In this case, she launches her to somewhere where Riko can immediately get rid of an ice wall. There's a couple crevices like that throughout the game that you can only get through that way because they're not on the ground by shooting into them with Yo's cannon, and that's basically your way of getting through these narrow areas unless they're on the ground like that. Some of them are intended to, I guess, come through the other way, and also if you're shooting at the wall, it's like a narrow kind of leeway to be able to get it. So you have to be precise, and you'll probably shoot yourself into the wall like I did a couple times. And in this case, there's like, because the cannon doesn't stop, she'll go right through when I finally get it. And like, I think I spend a little bit of time trying to get back, but it's like either way, you're not able to get to that middle area in this particular case. You got to find another way around to get there. Like, it's intended that you drop down from above and go either way in that particular situation. Jeez, how long did I spend on that? Okay. The other thing that Yo's cannon lets you do is go further horizontally than you would normally. Go further horizontally than you can jump. In this particular case, I kind of hit the thing I'm trying to get on top of, so I tried again. But like, what it lets you do is basically, rather than drop down in any way or have to deal with jumping, you can just keep going straight horizontal and make these jumps that you can't normally make to get these items. Throughout the game, you'll find setups like this that require you to use the cannon to get around like that, because otherwise there's no real way to get there. And those are the two things that Yo's cannon does for you. When you get its second ability, it'll like keep going when you hit something that's not like a wall. But it's so late in the game at that point that like, what are you really going to do with it? But like throughout the game, it's one of your best traversal options for getting around because of how fast it is. Next up is Ruby. She gets a little pink cotton candy ability that blocks enemies' attacks. It's really necessary a couple times because enemies that do that will do some really nasty stuff. Here I am choosing it once to get around a particular enemy that does that, because you can sometimes, although Ruby really helps to not deal with that. And the other thing that Ruby does with her second ability is outright have the cotton candy cloud eat an enemy. And, you know, it's an instant death ability, which is pretty cool. The other thing that ability does is if you push this block down, it would still block your access to get that. So instead, Ruby's cotton candy demon thing is going to eat the block and keep it from getting in our way. And finally, we have Marie, who's going to fire the laser. She does a thing. She fires a laser. It's a pretty strong attack on its own. Gets rid of enemies pretty well. Can hit a wide horizontal area all at once. And one thing for the horizontal area is to hit multiple switches at once, like that. So you can hit both at once. Open that switch, open that door, get through. Her second ability lets you freeze time. Now this is incredibly useful. First we're solving a puzzle with it where like that door wouldn't stay unlocked unless we froze time while unlocking it. So there we go, getting our thing. The other thing it's really useful for is for freezing time while you have a boss vulnerable, as I'm doing here. Because while he's vulnerable and not killing you, you have a window to keep attacking him and wailing on him as hard as you can, because this boss in particular is a huge doozy. So that's a huge benefit, to be able to freeze time and not have to deal with it anymore. And that's pretty much what you're going to be dealing with for YOHANE the Parhelion. Blazing the Deep Blue. You're going to have a lot of abilities over the course of the game, a lot of different ways of getting around, and it's a really interesting Metroidvania for the traversal options, for the attack options, for all the different ways you can play the game, for all the different ways you can get around even area, and all the different ways it opens up as you get the new abilities. It's really cool. It's a really good Metroidvania, and it's an anime game worth your time. The world of anime games out there is vast. There's a ton of stuff out there. Not all of it is good. But I hope that going through these 6 games that I've gone through here has shown you some of the good ones out there. I'm Regulus. These are 6 anime games worth your time. Like and subscribe if this helped you. Cheers.